I've been excited for this game ever since it was initially announced, but now that it's finally here, I've got some mixed feelings on it. There's some really great stuff here, but there's also some elements that'll leave you wanting more. Welcome to Bite Size Bunny, my name's Tony, and today we are going to be talking about South of Midnight. Starting out with the writing, I think for the most part, the writing in this game rocks. I love the way the story is structured, making it feel more like a chapter book, which gives it a very distinct style. The way the missions and chapters are structured leave you constantly wanting to know what's going to happen next by the end of each one. The characters in this world are great and the voice acting is even better. The performances really do elevate the characters and the storytelling in South of Midnight. Hazel is a great protagonist that you are constantly rooting for, as the main story has you trying to track down your mom who went missing after a hurricane hit your hometown. The side stories that take place throughout this game are really heavy and emotional. Throughout the game, you are trying to piece together the traumatic events or tragedies that have occurred in the characters' lives you encounter throughout the story. And each one of these side stories is really well crafted. The writers did a great job. These side stories are dark, they're depressing, but they serve as such an interesting contrast to this bright, beautiful, fantastical world that you are exploring. Unfortunately, the last act of this game feels really messy. It feels like it is missing a sizable chunk of content, especially as you enter those last few chapters. So much of this game is tightly crafted and flows wonderfully until it doesn't. I don't know if this is one of those cases where the studio was told, hey, you're putting out your game on this date no matter what happens, or whatever the deal was here. It's really bizarre how the story quickly just falls apart altogether towards the end and feels so incomplete, with a few story beats feeling very abrupt and sudden. This game, from a stylistic standpoint, is a work of genius. I love the art style and the music, like holy shit, I can't wait for this to drop on Spotify. Then, unfortunately, we've got the gameplay. I was really underwhelmed by the combat in South of Midnight. It's not bad, it just feels so soulless and mundane. Every combat scenario takes place in a small arena and it quickly grows repetitive. While they do try to introduce a variety of enemies, the enemy types never feel distinctly different enough that you have to mix up your gameplay as you go into each one of these combat encounters. You've got your typical skill tree as well, but a lot of the abilities and attacks you're unlocking feel very generic and don't really do much to spice up those fighting mechanics. Personally, I feel like the entirety of the combat in South of Midnight feels tacked onto it to maybe try and appeal to a wider audience, especially when you've got the platforming on the other hand that is actually enjoyable. Not to mention, you've got the ability to go into your settings and skip all of the combat scenarios in this game if you do actually want to play through it as just a story game with platforming mechanics. The platforming is nothing revolutionary, but it is still very enjoyable. It does feel way more thought out and like the game was intended to be a platformer. The movement feels pretty solid, and thanks to the gorgeous environments, climbing and jumping around feels fun and engaging. Overall, there is some great stuff in South of Midnight. I really loved the world and characters you meet along the way in your journey. Hazel is also a great protagonist, and I really hope we get a sequel to this game so we can spend more time with her. While I do really enjoy a lot of the story, I do feel like it falls apart in such a way towards the end that it does end up putting a damper on the overall experience, and the gameplay is sadly really disappointing. While the platforming is fun and well crafted, the combat is really lacking. I do think this game maybe even would have benefited from removing the combat entirely from the experience. With all that being said, I'm going to be giving South of Midnight a 6.5 out of 10. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. Like, subscribe, and all that YouTube stuff. And what are your thoughts on South of Midnight? I'd love to know.